So my name is Mark Johnson. I am the founder of an organisation called User Voice, which is a charity. I am a Guardian columnist. I'm a board member for the London Probation Trust, and I'm an Ashoka Fellow as well. Life wasn't always like that. Under psychiatry at 8 years old for being violent. Tried heroin at 11. Sort of took this sort of railroad ride into life from the dysfunctional background that I come out of, and it ended 29 years of age, being on the streets not too far from me, the West End, 7.5 stone, covered in body lice and the scabs that had grown through the socks of my feet, through this debilitating illness of drugs. And often I'm sat down there, and I was probably on about, maybe on average, £400 a day. Yeah? So that was robbing, stealing, lying, cheating to fund this ever-increasing habit. And I'm in a shop doorway in this state, and people are walking past me, in a suit, with an eye suit on, and I couldn't understand why that I'm probably on more money than they are, and yet they've got this kind of successful living, and I'm in this doorway. And I call it moral confusion. Do you know what I mean? That when you've got two responsible parents who are dysfunctional, you don't learn the difference between right and wrong. Do you know what I mean? And you become morally confused, and then that gives you this allergic reaction to life where you don't fit in anywhere, or your behaviour isn't actually often your intention. And that's me. Got clean at 29. I got sent to a residential drug treatment centre. Westminster City Council paid £20,000 for intensive therapeutic intervention for me. And that's where the Mark Johnson that's now in front of you basically comes from. Where I had every deluded belief that I had about myself peeled away. And I was in a safe environment where I could recover from the sort of wreckage of the past. Leaving this treatment, full of the fear, because I'd had no conception of living life without changing how I feel, without using chemicals. Full of this fear, I thought, where am I going to go? I'm going to be on the streets without any money. So my entrepreneurial brain kicked in, and I come out with this elaborate business plan of how I'm going to start this arboricultural company, which is tree care. And it was all lies. I wanted a deposit for a flat because I was petrified of leaving that. My brain's quite quick. And so I went to the Prince's Trust for this loan, and they crazily give me £3,000. There was no record on me on Social Security, there was no bank account, there was no credit history or anything, and they give me a junky £3,000. And it burnt a bit of a hole. But luckily for me, it allowed me to go back to work. Yeah, and what I'd done is, I didn't know, I'd done a little bit of tree surgery while I was using, and I made these colossal attempts at living life successfully, and I done this bit of tree surgery and thought that I wanted to go back to it. So I went back to work, bought all the tools and stuff, bought my first lorry, second lorry, third lorry, fourth lorry, fifth lorry. I had a crew of 25 core staff, and I was held to account that in my business plan I said I'm going to employ ex-offenders and people in recovery, young offenders. And I created a therapeutic work-based practice, yeah? So if there's an argument or a gripe or a complaint, we sit down, address it, and then move on. And I think that was quite successful. And I'll tell you the success of it, it wasn't in, we help vulnerable people, it was financial. Yeah, that's how I measure my success in that business. From there, I won a couple of business awards, won the Pride of Britain, got introduced to the Prince of Wales, quite surreal. In fact, my life in the last 12 years has probably been more surreal than it has when I was actually out there. But so made friends with him, and he asked me to go and work with the Prince's Trust, and I designed a programme of mentoring support, this is years back, for young offenders. And this is where sort of starts to get born, this idea. So who are the experts? Is it the media? Yeah, the media has such an impact onto how we view crime and criminals that actually I think that the public is educated via the media. The political environment is held by the throat of the media, and there's more sort of. You only have to look at the news to see how dysfunctional that environment is. Is it researchers, so high-end academic people without the living experience of this sort of environment that crime comes from in this country, but have a very colonialist approach to social problems? Yeah? So they'll go into a community with their clipboards and stuff, they'll walk into their offices, they'll derive what they think the solution is, and then they'll go and regurgitate it on a community, and actually we wonder why we've got these high rates of recidivism, why it doesn't work. And I actually, I've been at the hands of a lot of these throughout my criminal past. Is it the policymakers? My charge is that policymakers are so detached from the reality that they're coming out with policy that actually it doesn't fit for the community. Is it service providers? Service providers are a business first and foremost. And I use the term service provider because the face is changing to how we sort out social problems. So third sector, which is charities, private sector and public sector are all this mishmash now working together to try and solve the sort of problems. But the psychology of a service provider is any business service its own needs before any delivery gets done. And that's an interesting point that we'll go on to. I use this, and it's really simple, and I'm not sure if everybody's going to get it, but basically you've got commissioner, so somebody who's charged with finding a solution to a social problem, and they're the budget holder. Then you've got the service provider, which is now an industry. There's big books in criminal justice, there's big books in rehabilitation, there's big books in disadvantaged people. And then you've got the service user. That makes up the world of criminal justice, and that's what context I'm speaking on. There's a very dysfunctional relationship between service provider and commissioner. And my argument, and where I've created my argument in this charity that I'm founder of, is that there is no robust mechanism to self-organise the community, yeah, and to hear back from them, to feed back into services. There's a detachment, yeah? Nobody has got or helped this offending community to actually make better services. And that's my argument. And what I talk about, and actually challenge a lot of policymakers, and there's a resounding silence often, because nobody can actually present this. How do you develop services when you don't have a mechanism to hear what type of services are needed? And they're coming through the provider industry, which has its own agenda. And so my ideal situation is commissioner, service user, coming together, then commissioning services, which are then provided. This is the birth of user voice. So in all of this policy environment that I've been involved in, somebody like me has too much choice and direction of where to go. And actually I've worked out that it's in direct, relation to having too little choice. It can actually stagnate you and sort of incapacitate you. But when I looked at it, it's not about me. And I could share my experiences and, all day long and every day. But actually, it's about creating this mechanism to allow a community which is not heard to self-organise to change policy. And I went on the door-knocking rounds, and I approached Saatchi & Saatchi, who come up with this brand. And it says, only offenders can stop reoffending. Now, huge organisations claim to stop reoffending in this country. When you're looking at the charity world that works with disadvantaged people, they will all tell you that they're successful in what they do. Yet we have recidivism figures at such a high rate, something like 70% for 18 to 21-year-olds that come out of prison and go back in and reoffend. But everybody's doing really well, but we've got the figures to actually to question that. So this is a mechanism which allows people with a lived experience of criminal justice and disadvantage to self-organise, to come back in, to feed into policy that will make changes to services that they receive. When we're looking at how the cycle of change, and the reintroduction into society, Einstein, she wrote this in 1963, and so we've adapted a little bit, because on the bottom rung it said therapy, and we know a lot more about therapy now, that it's co-produced and not something that's done to somebody. So I often ask service providers, and I'm often the most uncomfortable person in the room when I'm present, but do you get, do your service users inform what you do? Yes, yes, yeah. Do you consult with your service users? Yes, we've got these surveys and etc. And do you get feedback? Yes, we've got feedback forms in our reception rooms and etc. Well, Einstein suggested that those are degrees of tokenism, at best, low value for the end user, And where user voice is placed, and all of my thinking is partnership and co-production. Now, there's a big sort of probably movement around co-production, but my challenge is that co-production can be done with unequal beneficiaries. You can co-produce a service, one person take more benefit than the next. So what I do is put partnership in there, because partnership suggests that that's actually an equal measure, that if I work with you, I will get the same out of this than you will. So you're getting £40,000 a year to develop a service, and you're giving me a jam sandwich and a bus fare and a pat on the head. That is unequal. And when we're talking about reducing reoffending, we have to empower the most vulnerable people to help them make the changes to be reintroduced, to be an active citizen. When I believe that the problem doesn't actually exist as much as one is the media say, the researchers say, etc. But I believe that it's more often a systemic failure that causes this, perpetuates this cycle of reoffending. When down the road in government, we have these departments: housing, health, people who work with mental health, addiction, crime, employment, and people who work with social services and childhood. But they work in silos. Health doesn't talk to the police. The police doesn't talk to employment agencies. Employment agencies don't talk. There's a disconnect within those services. But that person in the middle is the service user, and his expertise is actually in direct relation to all of those little slices of the cake there. He actually has an insight into all of that service, and yet nobody spent the time to extract that from him. And I find that quite worrying, because if you've seen the world from his point of view, from the person who uses services, you would get a very different perspective, and I believe some ultimate answers. So user voice is unique because its work is led by ex-offenders and delivered by ex-offenders. So I created this organisation 3 years ago, very negative economic climate, all theory, got some funding, got half of what I needed, and then had this problem of having to deliver before I had the capacity to. Now, everybody's probably had those experiences, but when you're working with high-risk people and putting them in a high-risk environment, it sort of, the problems can escalate. So that's the mission statement of User Voice. So the real experts, what have they got to offer? Well, it's about extracting the solution from the problem. That I believe that the communities in which, the sort of media say that, are criminal or high addiction rates and low unemployment, etc., I believe they have the solution to their own problems. And it's all about how we extract that and work with them to get them out. It empowers people. It promotes personal responsibility. There's a big theory at the moment, it's called desistance, and the academics and researchers have come up with it. Actually, it's a scientific term for something that's actually not scientific. It means stop and stay stopped. And the real expertise within that is somebody who's gone through that cycle themselves, going back and feeding in their hard-won experience of navigating into successful living. So what does engagement, partnership and co-production offer? Well, it's better services for one. And ultimately, it reduces reoffending and aids this rehabilitative process of people. The model we set up was it's a council concept, and I hate to use this term, but I'm going to use it. It's democratised service user engagement, right? And what it basically means is the people that get to see or talk about the prison environment, the people that get often to share their views to the governor or the senior staff are probably the easiest ones to hear. You know, they're going to tell people what they want to hear, and then the boxes tick saying we've consulted with our service users, but they're not representative of those deeply entrenched in criminal activities within prison or on the street. And I believe there's three groups of people. I call them the don'ts, the do's, and the haves. The don't engage with the service can tell you what's not on offer. And what's not incentive. The do's will tell you what it's like now. The haves can give you a full picture of actually what those services are like. So you need to come up with a mechanism that's fully democratic, that incorporates all of these people. And we piloted one element of it in the Isle of Wight prison, 1,600 prisoners. Albany, which is a sex offender prison, average length of stay 8.5 years. You can imagine the client group in there. OAP, gripey bunch of people. There was a 37% reduction in prisoner complaints from there. Parkhurst, which is a notorious high sort of security prison, there was a reduction in the use of solitary confinement from 160 days to 47. So what it suggests is having this model of democratic service user engagement and council. What it suggests is that by addressing problems closer to the cause within the community, you reduce the need for this punitive, often expensive outcome. Interestingly, when I talked about commissioner, provider, end user, there's something there which is a safeguarding consultation. We worked with the Children's Commissioner, who's charged with child welfare in this country. We worked with the Youth Justice Board, who's locks them up. Yeah, and looks at the sort of criminal justice side of it. We lock children up at 10 years old in this country. And so we'd done this commission. I took a group of ex-offenders with a living experience. I trained them up as researchers. We went into prison and worked without barriers. When you've had a dysfunctional past and been abused, you have this real severe attitude to people who represent authority. Yeah, speaking to an ex-offender, you don't have those boundaries. And so we collected all of this information from these group of ex-offenders, and it allowed this the experience to be translated to these kids of saying change is possible because we've been where you are and now we've changed. That produced a report. Now in that report, the kids on safeguarding wanted to talk about the overuse of restraint in their experience of the safeguarding procedure. But the YJB as a provider, they actually have a resistance because of the sensitive political nature of that information to not want to let that out. But the Children's Commissioner, who's charged with the welfare, have an agenda to want to hear that information. So by putting those three dynamics together, Commissioner, provider and user, what's happened is that actually you've got some accurate knowledge out, you've helped people along the way, and it cost £25,000. It was really cheap. And it made 8 systemic changes through the whole system of youth justice. And I would argue to anybody to show me a better investment than that. So this is, I'm just going to go back, stop it. This is a film. When we first started, one of the guys that was involved in the council, will just show you another very visual version of what user voice, part of what its work does.
All of you, please, are there any key recommendations which you would advocate in this area?
I think the main thing that we could do is include people within the system, because we always feel like we're being dictated to. We always feel like we're being talked at and not being talked to. And right now, I know so many of my friends and people that I've grown up with that have no idea that there is a Home Office Select Committee that's going on that's trying to solve these problems. So, I mean, why am I the only young person here? I mean, shouldn't we be involved in the solution? If we're part of the problem, shouldn't we be included in the solution as well?
Well, how many members of your group are there, User Voice?
Well, at the moment, User Voice only started 6 months ago, but I mean, what we do is that we employ ex-offenders, and what we do is that we say that only offenders can stop re-offending.
Here is our challenge to you. You made a very valid point. We need to include you, and we need to include young offenders. We
Definitely.
want to get to the bottom of this. Why don't you get together a suitable group of people who you think are the kinds of people the Select Committee on Home Affairs should talk to, so it's not just men and women in suits talking to you, at you, as you say, but involve dialogue. We would be delighted to give you that challenge, and we'd be delighted to work with you. Can you do that for us?
100%. I'm delighted.